Hi, this video is going to look at how to evaluate an A-level business. It's particularly aimed at Edexcel, although having said that, whilst I'll look at Edexcel questions, the points made could apply to any exam board. So I always think of evaluation as you are putting a value on something. Okay, you are coming to some sort of judgment on the strength of arguments, or you're trying to back up a reason that you have come to a particular conclusion based on evidence. So evaluation is the final of our assessment objectives, AO4, and to come to a sound evaluation you really need to have demonstrated all of the prior assessment objectives. You need some knowledge, you need to have applied that knowledge relevant to a case study. You then need to have gone into some sort of depth of analysis of the issues within that business, and then your evaluation is trying to come to some sort of conclusion. It's always helpful to remember that in a business exam you're being asked to be a business consultant, right? A business consultant is someone who's paid to go into a business and make recommendations. They consider that business's unique scenario, the factors affecting that business, its strengths and weaknesses, what they're trying to achieve, and then they make some recommendations about what that business should do based on all of those factors. And that's what the evaluation is. It's your judgment really on what a business should do. So particularly for Edexcel, when do we evaluate? We evaluate in 8-mark questions, which come up in paper 3. So this question is assess 2 difficulties for Michael O'Leary when developing from an entrepreneur to a leader. So the assess 2 difficulties is the main part of the question, but the assess command word here says we need to look at the other side of that. So for example, one of the difficulties of moving from an entrepreneur to a leader is that when you're an entrepreneur, you get to make all of the decisions yourself. You're running the business. When you're a leader, you have to delegate decision making. So that can be difficult for people because, entrepreneurs often like to be in control. But you could then assess why that might not be difficult. Actually, delegating a lot of the decision making to people lower down the business when you've grown a business actually frees you up. You have more time to think of the strategic things. So yes, that can be a difficulty, but there's another side to that. And so that is one place we would evaluate in 8-mark questions. We also evaluate in 10 and 12-mark questions. So here's a 10-mark question. Assess the extent to which Zara's use of just-in-time may have contributed to its success. So structure for that, we do a paragraph on why just-in-time might have contributed to its success, why it might not, and then we have a conclusion. Was just-in-time a contributor to Zara's success? Okay. A 12-mark question, similar structure. Right, assess the usefulness of scenario planning to a business such as ASOS. We're going to want to consider paragraph 1. Scenario planning is useful, why it might not be useful in paragraph 2, and then come to a conclusion. So that requires some sort of evaluation in the conclusion. And a slightly different 10-mark question from the most recent, this is from the 2022 paper. Assess, with reference to Porter's 5 forces, whether the bargaining power of buyer represents the most significant external influence on EasyJet. Okay, is it the most significant? So we have a paragraph on whether the bargaining power of buyers is the most significant external influence, but then we could select any of the other of the 5 forces, so any of the other 4 remaining forces, and do a paragraph analysing why that might be a significant one. Or we could do a paragraph on other significant external influences on EasyJet. So these, the first 2 examples I've given you here of the 10 and 12, these are just paragraph 1, yes, paragraph 2, no, conclusion. That includes evaluation. And with this example here, we've got a, assess a factor, basically. You can think of that as factor 1 and an open to interpretation factor 2, second paragraph, and then our conclusion, what is the most significant external influence? Okay, either way, particularly these 3 questions here require us to come to some sort of judgment. All right, the first one might just consider evaluation as considering both sides of an argument. Of course, there is also a 20-mark question. And generally, the 20-mark question gives us some sort of business scenario. In this case, it's Zara, and they're expanding to 200 more stores, and they're considering either quality control or total quality management. You need to evaluate the two options, so that means looking at the pros and cons of each option, and then recommend which one would be the best. So 5 paragraphs here: pros of quality control, and then a brief however, second paragraph, pros of TQM, brief however, fourth paragraph, and then the fifth paragraph is which one would be the best way for them to maintain the quality of their clothes. They've put one in bold here. They don't want you to say they should do both, because obviously you can't do that. All right, so if they really click keen, they don't want you to say both. They want you to evaluate. They want you to judge which one. So how to evaluate, and this can apply for any exam board. So evaluation, this is a format that Edexcel mentioned in their examiner's report, particularly for 20-mark questions, but it can also be used for judgments in 10 and 12-mark questions. I've skipped a slide. So what does evaluation include? Well, evaluation includes assessing both sides of an argument or other important factors, and you can use phrases like however, on the other hand, to signpost that you're evaluating. You could consider the strength of different arguments. All right, so you can think about phrases like this would be a strong argument or a weak argument because, okay, however, this might be unlikely because, and you're considering the strength of these different arguments, whether or not they're likely. Are they strong or are they weak arguments? Both of those are ways of evaluating that might actually appear before the conclusion, but definitely evaluation does include making a clear judgment in a conclusion. It involves identifying the key piece of supporting evidence. What is it from the case study? What's the key piece of evidence that makes you think that this is a valid judgment? What's the most important factor that's determining your decision? That's evaluation, saying this factor, despite the fact that this course of action has this big disadvantage, this massive advantage is going to outweigh it. This is the key piece of evidence that I'm basing my decision on. That is evaluation. And you can also state some of the factors that a judgment depends on. So I'll show you some examples to make that clear. Okay, so Edexcel talk about Mops, which is a suggested approach to making judgment. Mops stands for market, where you consider the unique nature of the competitive environment that a business is in. My judgment is because this business operates in this market where they are, up against lots of competitors, or there's no competitors, and that will determine, the course of action. Okay. Referring back to the business's objectives, what is the business trying to achieve? All right, because the business is trying to achieve improved customer service, I think they should go for option Y because ... Okay, product. What are the unique things that could be considered in terms of a business's product or USP? So, you'll probably make a different evaluation judgment if you're evaluating for Primark. High volume, low price versus a more exclusive brand, and a luxury brand would have a different conclusion because of the product that they're selling. And finally, this kind of term is like a catch-all thing. What is it? What are the distinctive factors affecting this business that have determined your judgment? What's this business's situation? And you wouldn't have to mention all of these in a conclusion. You might just mention one. But I would be really explicit about which one you're mentioning. If I'm writing a conclusion for Edexcel, I might say something along the lines of, given this business's situation, which is X, I am recommending Y. And just explaining that and being really explicit about the fact that you are using Mops, which is the suggested approach to making judgments. So, again, let's just have a quick look at some examples to try and see where these are actually used by students. So I've lifted these from the examiner's reports that are freely available on the Edexcel website. This question, I've discussed it before, but I'll just give you a second to pause the video and read it. I particularly like this example because this is a real student answer, right? And you can see that they've annotated, they've written assess, yes, no. The bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of buyers. Do the buyers have power over ticket prices? I can't read that, but they've got a plan basically, all right. And then they've looked at the counter arguments here. It looks like suppliers of plain parts. Don't quite know what they've said there. It doesn't matter. If this student can read it, they have planned what their answer is. And indeed, they scored 9 out of 10. And this was their conclusion. And again, I'll just give you a second to pause the video and read the conclusion. So the question is, assess whether the bargaining power of buyers represents the most significant external influence on EasyJet, and they start off by very explicitly saying it can be seen as the most significant external factor because ticket sales rely on customers buying them. Okay, but they've used it depends on here, right? But it depends on how popular EasyJet are and the level of rivalry with new rivals competition. But this is the key bit that's going to get it into the top band. But moreover, because EasyJet is the 7th largest airline in the world, it will have loyal customers, so this can be seen as less of a threat, and therefore the bargaining power of buyers can be seen as the most important external influence due to controlling how many tickets they are affecting EasyJet. Okay, so they have referenced EasyJet's situation here. They're the 7th largest airline in the world, and this student clearly answered the question, explained what that judgment depends on, and referenced EasyJet's situation to support their answer. Okay, another question. So again, just a minute to pause the video and maybe read what we've got here. Okay, so to be clear, the question is to assess whether the change in price of jet fuel, which increased significantly between November 2015 and July 2018, so the price of jet fuel went up, how much, assess whether that may have affected EasyJet's management of its working capital. And so this conclusion follows on from a yes-no paragraph, and the student writes to summarise the need for EasyJet to alter its working capital, i.e. has it been affected it, is dependent on whether a change in the price of oil is just the short-term fluctuation or part of a longer-term trend. So this candidate has answered the question, and the answer is, well, it depends on if it's just a short-term or is it part of a longer-term trend. If the rise were to persist, it's likely that EasyJet would have to alter its working capital to ensure they are able to pay off their current liabilities. And for example, they could do this by passing on the cost to the consumer and raising the selling price. So this answer has used its depends on and it's short versus long term. It got 11 out of 12. To be honest, I would like to see a bit more application to EasyJet in here. So, for example, mentioning that they could pass the costs on to the customer and raise the selling price because they are the 7th largest airline in the world and they have some power over their customers. That would be an even better way to bring in EasyJet's situation and improve that conclusion. Okay, final one. So, reminder, this question is about whether Zara should use quality control or total quality management, and this is a 20-mark question. And let's see what this student has done. Nice big handwriting. To conclude, I believe the best option for Zara is to adopt total quality management. Now, I particularly like this as a way to start a conclusion, having a clear answer at the beginning and then supporting that. This way, any prototype errors can be spotted and rectified sooner to ensure products are of high quality. So they have made the decision, they've justified it, then they bring in the situation with their high-end fashioned market. In fact, this is market, isn't it? It's not just situation. With their high-end fashion market being incredibly competitive, so this is all about the market of Mops, it is essential that Zara ensures high-quality clothing to be able to compete with and not lose customers to the likes of H&M. So this is all about the market, which could be risked if they opted for quality control. So this conclusion was in an essay that got 18 out of 20, which is a very good score. And what have they done? They've first of all answered the question. They have been specific. They've supported the answer which is the prototype errors can be rectified sooner to ensure products are of high quality. And they've justified that given the situation in the market. So they're using Mops, talking about the market, they're high-end fashion, and it's a competitive market where they could lose out if they don't do this. So to summarise, I believe that a good conclusion answers the question clearly. It makes reference to the business's situation, is supported using evidence from the case study, and identifies the key factors that have been used to come to that conclusion. So I hope that video was useful on evaluation.